there, welcome back to our show. Today I'm going to talk about A Return to Salem's Lot, which is the Larry Cohen sequel in name only to Salem's Lot. Now this is a weird background. Essentially it was a direct-to-video title. I mean, I think it got a token release maybe, but not much. It was made for the video market. And because Larry Cohen is a low-budget director, he made films in the 60s and 70s that went to the exploitation screens. And in the 80s, those grindhouse screens went to video, basically. So he kind of went in there, so you get token releases, but the films were mass entertainment not for the kind of highbrow critics, or much more for just the general people that were genre films. But Cohen had a thing with his films, there was tons of ideas in his films, but a lot of the time they were very undisciplined, and they weren't always brilliantly directed. So he'd get a lot of complaints, but people like David Cronenberg did not like Larry Cohen films because they were a bit shoddy, and I think he thought it made horror look bad. Other people liked them because they were kind of low budget, shoddy films, and there was a charm to that. So it just depends on what you like. I liked his films. I've always liked his films, but they are shoddy. But they do have lots of ideas. And so by the late 80s, the mid to late 80s, his career was in a bit of a downturn. And essentially, he would bounce back a lot bit in the 90s with the ambulance and things like that before he became sent to a writer. Once he hit a certain age, he just became a writer. He started off in TV as a writer, then became a writer, director, and then at some point became a writer again for films. And some films were hits and some films were failures, but, he was a good writer. He's a better writer than he was a director, is the best way to put it. That was always the case. So this film was part of a two-film deal that was for a sequel to It's Alive. Well, there was two It's Alive films in the 70s. There was It's Alive and It Lives Again. So they thought we'd do another It's Alive film, which we called Island of Alive. Island of Alive. I don't know why I said that twice. And that was a film set up to be done. And there was also Return to Salem's Lot. It was like a case of find another thing you're interested in doing. And it was a low budget thing. We'll do a deal for both these films in one. So he saw that they had the rights to Salem's Lot and said, well, what about this? Even though he wasn't a fan of vampire films, he said, what about this? I can do something with this. And he said, yeah, go ahead, just keep the budget low so we can make money back. So he went and made these two films that I don't know if they ever got cinema releases. I know in Britain they just came straight to video. They came out after The Stuff, which was a cinema release, I think. But they came out, didn't get great reviews, but they became cult films, and typical for Cohen, basically. And I've not seen Island of the Alive, or whatever it's called, but this one I've just recently saw, finally. And remember that Stephen King hated it because it wasn't really a sequel to Salem's Lot at all, in any possible way. It took the title and did its own thing, which is what the charm is of the film, because it completely ignores the novel. It has no interest in the novel. It just likes the idea of a town full of vampires in the middle of Maine. That's his only interest. And essentially, in this story, the vampires have been there for centuries, rather than them invading in the King novel. They've settled in. They have lookouts, basically people who are during the day. The people are the humans. So when I'm through the town, there's some humans there, but they never become vampires. They're just the cover. These vampires are rich. They've got real estate everywhere. They mainly cook. They mainly eat they bleed out the cows rather than cows for milk. They bleed out the cows, and then they let them recover so they can keep the cows for years and suck in the empty and get their blood. They don't have to hunt anymore. They come out at night, and during the daytime they sleep in their coffins. And essentially they're civilized to a degree. They've learned to live, you know, where they are, to not be seen. And it's basically about Michael Moriarty, who moves there with his son because he's inherited some property there, and he's just had a disaster with his son. His son has caused problems, and his ex-wife and his stepfather said, "You deal with him. He's just in pain. You deal with him." So Moriarty's like, "Okay, I've got this estate. We'll go and we'll do up this estate, and hopefully at that point we'll bond and we'll get him to kind of under control." Now Moriarty plays a guy who goes and makes films in the backwoods, find all these weird civilizations and like South American things. He's no interest in normal life. He likes finding strange creatures. So the vampires are strange creatures he's found, and they want him to write a book on their history, just for themselves, so that everyone knows there's a book to refer to, because he's a guy who likes to like find new civilizations and record about and find out all about them. It's like we'll open our books to you, just put everything together and actually have a proper history for us. So Moriarty agrees to that, as long as they leave him and his son alone. They don't try and convert them. Of course, Moriarty remembers being there as a kid first summer and falling in love with this older woman who's still the same age as she was then, because she's a vampire. And he was sent away, and he still had all this haunted feeling about going back to see her. And that affects him. His son starts to become friends with some of the child vampires or the teenage vampires, and he starts to become interested in life and the idea of living forever. Obviously, is something that interests him. And slowly, surely, the tension builds up. Moriarty's thinking, okay, I don't like this anymore. He's going to stay with them. I'm going to lose my son. And I'm very tempted by this woman. And this is very bad. Coming through town is a Nazi hunter played by Samuel Fuller, who's looking for a guy who's a Nazi, and basically gets involved with Moriarty's problem, and they go and hunt down the vampires at some point. And the film goes from being like a slow build to being like a action horror movie for the last third, which is all the cliches, all the stuff you want to see in a vampire movie, people getting staked, all the rest of that stuff. And it's a very strange film. It's one of those films you could never recommend to somebody and say, you're going to like this. Now, I liked it, even though some of the acting's not very good. The build comes and stops and starts. The atmosphere could have been better at times. Sometimes it's really nice, sometimes it's really kind of the budget shows. And it's just kind of weird, and it's kind of limited by its low budget, where it's like, we have to get in and out in like 90 minutes. And it's like, sometimes you're like, I wish they spent more time in this, because they built certain things up really interesting, and then they don't have time to deal with them. So it jumps around a lot, and it feels like there's like a 2-hour film here that could have been better and could be more atmospheric. Because it's an interesting idea of a community of vampires who have moved on and who have learned how to deal with life while being unseen. And you see the good points of them and the bad points of them, and the things they do, and how they see certain people as cattle and some people as more worthy. And every so often, if someone comes through who doesn't have any relatives, they'll have a meal on them. And there's all sorts of interesting things going on, and it's just like, it feels frustrating because it has to be a genre movie, and like a tacky genre movie by the end of the day, even though it's really silly, but it's also really enjoyable in certain parts, but in other parts you're actively frustrated by it. But that's part of the charm of the film, is it's a mess, but it's an interesting mess, and it's like there's just certain things happening. It's like, you didn't need to do that. There's other things like, this is so wonderfully weird that I'm so glad they made this film. And just the atmosphere of the vampires in this town covers a lot of interesting things. and it makes up for the excesses, weird excesses. But even the weird excesses are enjoyable. Like they do adaptation of Dracula from the vampire's point of view, and they've all these weird jokes in there, and it just is like Cohen's not taking it entirely seriously, but he's taking it seriously enough and playing around with it to make it about this weird cult of vampires. And it just becomes enjoyable how silly it is and how weird it is. And it's a genuine example of what the hell is this. Is like, it's not good or bad, it's just weird. It's just like, you could watch this film and think it's wonderful. You could watch the film thinking it was one of the worst things you've ever seen in your life. You know, you could not tell anybody what they're going to think of this film. It's just very strange. And, you know, I could see like costumes watching this high at 3 a.m. repeatedly, but I could also see someone watching this and going, what am I watching? What? I've been cheated out of my time and money. You know, it's that kind of thing. So, try it and see what you think. It's odd. It's an odd one. So, hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you all next time. Right, bye.